why don't we get started with high school? At what point in high school did you realize you were going to play Division I lacrosse?
Um, it's kind of a tough question. I think that being from Long Island definitely gave me a pretty good boost of confidence early on because when you would, and as a kid, even as a kid, and now still, I've always been pretty analytical, both of myself and my surroundings, right? And when you're in eighth grade and you're trying out for one of the top teams on Long Island just as a club team, and you make it, you start to think, okay, if I'm going to be one of the 6 attackmen on this top team for my grade in Long Island, what does that look like, for the future? And it started to be like, okay, I would look towards like the seniors in high school from Long Island. And I would look at like, let's say how many attackmen went Division I. And when I saw that, like, okay, like 15 to 20 of them per class go Division I, it became for me like, oh wow, like if I just made this top team and I'm a top 6 attackman, I guess, from whoever tried out or however I got onto the team, it became something for me that I was like, okay, like maybe I do have a future in this. And, and Danny, me growing up, like I just played everything, right? I played football, lacrosse, wrestling, basketball. I grew up on fields all over Port Washington. And when you think about Long Island football, you don't think of going Division I. When you think about, Long Island baseball, you don't think, all the other sports that I'd played were, I definitely, loved playing them, but it got to the point where for lacrosse, our environment in Long Island was was one that I was like, okay, like this, maybe I could do something more here as I continue to, get older and grow up. So, as early as like 8th grade, making one of these, top club teams, I did have some sort of a boost of, or a feeling of confidence that, okay, like if I continue to go down this road and really kind of put all my marbles into it going into 9th grade and 10th grade, I was like, okay, maybe I do have a chance. And then, my freshman year, I was able to make the varsity team and I was a starting attackman. And that was like, to me, I was like, okay, like there aren't that many varsity starters as freshmen in our league. So I was like, okay, that's pretty good. And then actually, interestingly enough, I don't know how much you know about this, but I got a pretty bad back injury after my freshman year of high school. I had stress fractures in my L4 and L5. They actually still bother me today. And I had to go into like a big plastic back brace for 8 months. Like literally, like I don't even know the material, but almost like the material of like an AirPod case. Like literally couldn't move. The only time I took it off was to shower and go to sleep. And so I was in that from July through February. I don't know how many months that is, but from July through February is basically when I was in that. And at that point I was like, ooh, this is kind of one of those breaking points in a career for me because I loved football and wrestling. Like absolutely loved them as my freshman year, all my life. And then I basically had to make a decision because I couldn't play all 3. I had to rehab throughout the year and then prepare for one season. And really that sophomore year is kind of when my, when my career kind of took off, because that was the first time that I took off from all the other sports and kind of put all my marbles into lacrosse because of the circumstances of my back. And, when that happened, my sophomore year, I had a pretty good year. And that's when I was like, okay, I could probably, do something here. And then, going into that summer is when I started the recruiting process kind of started for me. And then, it kind of went on from there.
Do you think that injury forcing you to put all your eggs in one basket impacted your career in such a way where you wouldn't have ended up at Hopkins or you wouldn't have ended up what you're doing now if it wasn't for that injury?
100%. There's no doubt in my mind. I think that, even as a college coach now, we constantly do recruit people who play multiple sports, football, wrestling, basketball. We preach people to play different sports. But at that point, it was kind of just a decision that I had to make. And I had so much history in playing those other sports and so much experience playing those other sports. It wasn't like it was make or breaking my athletic IQ to stop, if that kind of makes sense. And then, really the byproduct of what happened with that injury is I completely fell in love with the weight room. When I went to rehab throughout that 8 months, that was the only other time that I was able to take my back brace off, was during my rehab process. And I went to a gym, and still go to a gym called Acceleration Sports Training out in Deer Park on Long Island. And when I started going there, I started to become extremely interested in training, in the way the body works, in the way that you train, and the way that you split up an entire off season and how you regiment it. And, I think the thing that for me made me fall in love with it was because the way that they trained at that place, and still do, is, you get a workout, basically, you get like an upper body and a lower body workout, let's say at the bare bones of it, for a month. And then every time you do that workout, you record whatever weight you did at whatever sets, reps, whatever it was that they gave you. For me, at a time when for 8 months I couldn't compete, I was able to compete with myself every workout. And, that was like, that was everything to me. And growing up, and still, I think that like the thing that has allowed me to get to where I am is that competitive nature. Like I've always wanted to compete in anything that I do. And that's where I kind of changed my mindset, even as like a sophomore in high school, like I said, from competing with other people to competing with myself every single workout. And that was like the hook, line, and sinker for me, I think, with strength and conditioning. And that wouldn't have happened, quite frankly, if I didn't get a bad back injury, I think. I mean, you never know how things can end up, but I credit that gym, Acceleration, with the method, the way that they use it. And I was just a kid who was super interested, probably always asking annoying questions, always, wanting to understand the why behind we're doing X, Y, and Z. And then the real thing that I, absolutely fell in love with was that every single time I showed up, I was able to beat my last weight or my last score on a run, or how many pounds on a bench press or a deadlift. And there was always something to compete against. And that was when I think, in a lot of ways, looking back, obviously I don't think I realized this like at that moment as a sophomore, but it was when I really shifted my mentality to, you can find competitiveness, you can find a competitive environment, and you can create a competitive environment out of anything that you possibly want to. And the biggest for me was that competitive preparation. And that was something that's come with me since then. And I think that that's something that I certainly pride myself on. And to your point, obviously that's something that, can come in a lot of ways. Maybe it would have come in my junior year or my senior year, but I was very lucky that the injury was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I did fall in love with that aspect of everything. And quite frankly, I went on to play in college. I currently play professionally, and I currently coach Division I level. And a lot of kids see it way too late, that, you can always compete with yourself in the weight room. You could always compete with yourself. And, some people, like, the light bulb goes on early. I was extremely lucky that it did for me. But some guys, it's too late. Sometimes it's their senior year of college, and they're like, oh, we only have a couple months left together. Like, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. And, I do think that falling into that, that environment for me was huge. And, definitely something that I continue to try to, even to my players now at Lehigh, and anywhere that I've been, is that competitive preparation is everything. And it really is. It's always about making sure that you're focused, and, you're purposeful in your training. You know exactly what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, and all that. So, I guess that's a roundabout way of answering your question. But yeah, I really do think that injury allowed me to kind of bring my athleticism from like, a pretty raw competitive talent to somebody who, put on 35 pounds between my freshman and sophomore year, where I was 140 pounds as a freshman and I'm 175 pounds as a sophomore, gained confidence. And, then it kind of continued on from there. And that process hasn't stopped. It's not something that will stop until I'm done playing. And then probably after that, I'll probably keep doing it. Right. So it's, it's one of those things that, even as a freshman or sophomore in high school, has definitely pushed me down like an avalanche almost of competing against my last self.
I love that. I think it's such a useful way for people to start thinking about the world. And I'm curious about, obviously knowing you since we grew up, you're obviously an incredible athlete and always knew you to be an incredible athlete. But at what point did you look around and say to yourself, okay, my natural talent isn't going to take me to the place that I want to go? Was it that place sophomore year, or was it in college, or was it playing for club teams? At what point did you realize like the talent isn't going to get me to that next level?
Yeah, that's got to be from fourth grade.
Really?
I think that's a lesson that, I would credit to my parents, right? I think that like in everything that I had ever done, whether, if it was football and, I was trying out for quarterback, I would be in the backyard doing stuff with my dad. He'd be teaching me stuff at the field. If it was wrestling, my dad wrestled in high school. He would take me to, X, Y, and Z club wrestling practices after my wrestling practices. If it was baseball, we would always use my neighbor's backyard because it was a little bigger than mine. And I'd be pitching, to my dad. We would go down to the closest place for us that, okay, let me restart that. Even when I was growing up, I was primarily a pitcher in baseball, and that was like what I really liked to do. And I was pretty good at it, but it was never good just showing up and doing it. It was always that if I hadn't, had a great game, or even if I did have a good game, we would go down to the Chase Bank down at the corner of, I think it's Bogart. No, it might be Bar Beach Road. I don't know which one it is, because there's lights all the time in the parking lot.
Wow.
And we would basically set up there, and I would pitch like a full game essentially after a game, and I would do that before a game. I would do that on and off, and this is just stuff that nothing that my dad ever forced me to do. It was always me asking him to come with me to do that. And I think that started at a really young age, that, and I think that message was always very clear to me, is that, you have to, you get out what you put in whatever it is, right? In anything in life. And I've you see that on so many different levels. You see it in the classroom in college. You see that, in sport. You see that in relationships. You see that in friendships. You see that in, being a good brother, being a good son, that what you put out or what you put in is what you're going to get out. And I think that was something that was to me early. If I on a football game at Weber Middle School, and, we ran a play, or let's say I completed, 8 of 15 passes, I would, after the game, like I said, or the next day of the game or after the game, I would go throw those 7 routes with my dad out at the school, 10 times each. And that was something that has kind of always stuck with me. I actually started to do in college a lot as well, which was even in practices, I would count my drop passes, or I would count my bad passes. And what I did with that number. So every single practice I had a number. Let's say it was 12. Let's say it was 5. Let's say it was 4. Early on in my freshman year, it was more around 12 to 15 passes that I was dropping, whether it was shooting drills or during, live play or whatever it was. And I would take that number and basically say each one of those passes, like I said, I've always been pretty analytical about these things and pretty purposeful when I do practice. And I would basically, for those 12 to 15 drop passes that I'd have, I would go and I would basically have to do those again, replicate those passes 10 times each, on my own against a wall, before the next practice started. And if I didn't, I was in my own head about it and I couldn't catch the next practice. So I've always been very diligent about that. And I think that those habits definitely were created well before middle school, high school. Like it was literally, wrestling early, it was basketball early, it was football early. All those sports were things that like I just loved to do. And I'd get home from, let's say, a bad game or whatever, or making a couple mistakes, and I would 100% of the time go out and fix them. And that's always been a thing for me is trying to fix those things and always kind of trying to tweak the ability to do it. And I think more than anything, I don't think that it's like physically dropping the ball. It's more mental, right? It's all about, kind of turning the page, and it's always about, working on the things that you're not good at or fixing the things that you're not good at. And, that's something that I could give 7,000 examples of, whether it's shooting, dodging, stick work, whatever it may be. It was always trying to fix those things that I maybe didn't do well, and being very purposeful about that.
So you're a coach now, and you have to help someone create that mindset, and not everyone has that analytical nature like you do. So what are some of the ways that you coach that type of mentality into someone who wouldn't have that to begin with?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because I don't think everyone can be analytical. I don't think that it's a one-size-fit-all kind of mindset, and I think that it's dependent on the type of person, athlete, competitor that each kid is. Some kids, you can get pretty analytical with them and be like, hey, you're struggling from this angle with this type of shot, and we can kind of work on this on our own and blah, blah, blah. Other kids, that's too much thinking. Right. Mm-hmm. So I, as a coach, I don't try to give them everything that I have done, because I think that for some kids it would, they'd be like, I don't really know or care what you're talking about. But more like finding what it is with each kid, and how we can, at the end of the day, it's about development, and it's about growth, and it's about competitiveness. And if you can link your personal competitiveness to your growth method and your process of progress, right? Like if you can combine those two things, that's kind of the thing that I try to do in a different way with each type of person. So it's different, it really is. Like I said, there are some kids who are really analytical, some kids who aren't. And, for the kids who are, I could do very similar things that I used to do. And he'll come into the office for film after a game, and we'll take a look at each shot, let's say shooting, for example, and we take a look at each shot, see where it was, see why it didn't go in, see if it was a good shot, was it a bad shot? And then, then we'd be like, okay, so now you know what to practice for these next 2 days, at least to kind of turn the page from that last game. And then we can continue to work on what we think we're going to see in the next game and what the kind of shots are that we're going to develop there. And that's all right with the people who are a little bit more analytical. Some kids, it's about decision making, right? So it's not about the shot, it's about the decision to shoot. And you have to work on that decision-making piece with them. For some kids, their decision-making is really good, and then their shooting isn't great. So now you have to work on the shooting with them. So, I don't think that there's a cookie cutter way to say it. And I think that there's a lot of things that go into that. And I think the biggest piece, though, that gives you the groundwork as a coach to figure that out is creating context with the kids and developing relationships with the kids. And, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know what type of way to kind of tweak your coaching to them until you have somewhat of a relationship with them. You do have conversations with them constantly, see how they think, see what they do think about. And for me, this is only my second year at Lehigh. When I was I started at Notre Dame, was only there for a year. Started at Colgate, was only there for a year. Now I'm in a place where I think that I'm going to be for a little while. So, having a year and a half under my belt with these guys, I do have a better idea of what their mindset is into these things. And now you can kind of know how to tweak and coach and where to push, where not to push, what not to push. All those things are all, a case-by-case basis, where, in the past, if I only had a year with the kids, it's hard to develop a context with them and then also be able to specifically coach each kid the right way, right? You can obviously do your best, and you have to do, as a coach, do everything you can to build the relationship with them. Something that, the two biggest things that I do is eat and golf with our guys. So like eating, we go and grab a coffee, we grab dinner, we grab, lunch, I allocate a certain amount of money per year. And I understand that this amount of money is going to go to, like going and doing things with my players. So eating is one thing, obviously, that, you could obviously dig and ask questions and learn about them a little bit more outside of the lacrosse field. And then the other one is golf, that I never was very big into. It was never a sport I played in high school or anything. And really was just circumstantial with the COVID and the quarantine is kind of the only thing everybody did. And it was something that I certainly felt I started to really like. So I would just, over the fall, I went out and golfed with, at all of our offensive guys at least once, and that was just it's a 4-hour thing where you're just with them, so whether you like it or not, you're building some sort of contact, some sort of a relationship. You're starting to, understand the way they think, and understand the way they compete, understand the way that they analyze their shots. In golf, it's the same. It's all very similar and all very, very comparable or consistent across, right? So, so that's a really long-winded way of saying it's different for each kid, and it's all about you building enough of a relationship and understanding the way and honestly just knowing them and understanding how to tweak who to think a little bit more analytically with, who not to think more analytically with, but with the same end goal, being consistent, which is just that you have to prepare competitively. That's the bottom line. And if you can prepare yourself competitively against yourself and against other people, you can, that's kind of the end goal of the message that has to be, at least for guys' development and their progress. That's obviously a really important piece.
Based on what you just said, I did some research before we started this conversation, and you had a speech in 2015 where you're addressing a group of kids, and you said basically something like, confidence doesn't come from your coach telling you, great job, you did a great job. Confidence comes from knowing you did all you could to prepare. And I love this quote. I love this idea. And so how has this played a role in coaching and playing for you?
Yeah, I'll start with playing just to go chronologically. I think that's what I needed to do my whole life in terms of any sport, was if I felt like I can, if I was pitching, I could hit this spot consistently through my practice, I can go out and do it in a game. If, for lacrosse, when I was at Johns Hopkins, I went from playing attack to playing midfield. And, most of the time I was behind the goal playing, when I was on the field, I was kind of playing behind the goal. And then later in my career, I kind of became a little bit more versatile in terms of getting above the goal, because of the nature of playing midfield is usually above the goal. And I think that I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't put time into shooting, passing, dodging above the goal by myself. Like there's not enough time in practice for you to develop a skill and to develop comfortability in an area. And it's 100% dependent on how much you prepare, in my opinion, and how much time you're willing to spend on something. I always, with our guys, I translate it to, when you spend 4 hours studying for a test, you go into the test thinking you're not going to miss a thing because all the material, versus if, you do the Spark Notes and you're there for, you're in the library for a half hour, cramming before a test. You get to the test and, you might actually know the right answer, but you're not sure if it's right because you feel like you've missed a lot, right? So the more time that you spend on anything, right, the more comfortable and more confident you're going to get. So, I think that's something that I've definitely carried with me since I was a kid, but certainly was was the driving factor of any success that I had in college was, I was going to be the one who was every single day shooting extra, playing wall ball extra, lifting extra, running extra. And if I knew that I had all of those boxes checked every single day, that I was doing more than anyone else. So with that comfortability, with that, like I said, competitive preparation, I'm going to be confident that I'm going to be able to hit the shot that I've trained to hit over this past week because I've shot it 300 times versus if I just get out into a game without shooting that shot 300 times, I don't know if I'm going to be confident to hit the shot. I'll still shoot it, but I don't know if I'm going to hit it. So that actually got me into some trouble at times. Like I said, my lower back injury, a lot of times our coaches had to tell me to take days off and not shoot and literally take days off of practice. And, my senior year, it was to the point where I was going in early in the morning to get treatment so I could do the shooting drills that we were going to do in practice and then get ice right after and kind of isolate that as a part of my day at 7 a.m. and then go to class all day, then go to practice. And I wouldn't do the shooting drills in practice because it would bother my back if I was doing a drill and standing around, then doing another drill, and I'd come into practice just for a couple drills. And, I was lucky to have, some of the best coaches in the history of, Division I lacrosse, right? So, they had seen similar people to me throughout, their careers, and they knew how to handle me. And thankfully they did the right way. So I was able to stay healthy because a lot of the times I would kind of grind my back down to not being able to really participate in a full practice. Right. So I now have kind of figured out what the balance is between my work ethic in the weight room and then balancing it with running, balancing it with my diet, balancing it with sleep, balancing it with all these different things and kind of looking at it more holistically, where in college it was more like no, I'm just going to work, and that kind of got me into some trouble in terms of injury and being able to participate in practice. Now I never missed a game, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't I would never, for whatever it was, I would never miss a game, but a lot of practices were kind of like half days for me because where my body was at.
Does that hurt you mentally as someone who is such a competitor, who is willing to work so hard, when someone tells you, hey, you got to sit on the sidelines? How does that feel to you, and how do you think about that type of punishment, quote unquote?
Yeah, it crushes you. It absolutely crushes you if you're not able to be out with your boys and practicing and competing. It's what you prepare every day for. But that's just been, that's a communication between me and my coaches, and our coaches, like I said, are the best in Division I history. Some of the best coaches ever. And when you have an idea that your coaches are just as prepared and just as competitive as you are, you're a lot more willing to listen to what they say, especially with 17 years of experience. Not that I would ever just not listen to a coach and just kind of run on the field. That's not how I've grown up, right? But, I do credit a lot of that to the, relationship that they built with me. And, the context that, they've created and not context, that's the wrong word. But I guess the
trust,
credit. Yeah, maybe trust, that is what it is. It's a trust in your coaches. And, with those guys, they've earned that, obviously, with, Coach Petro and Coach Benson and Coach Dwan, all guys from Hopkins. And then our strength and conditioning coach, who I worked with a whole lot as well, Coach Jay Dyer. I had a lot of trust in those guys that they knew what they were talking about. Obviously, it's not easy to hear because you want to be out at practice, but there are other ways to contribute to practice. And that's something that I learned a whole lot of in my junior and senior year. For this reason was, coaching up younger guys, coaching up guys who were playing for me, coaching up, our offensive guys, bringing energy and, bringing heat from the sideline and still going in and watching film and probably spending way more time in film when I'm not able to practice than I would if I was practicing. So, there are other areas to do it. There are other areas to put your time, and especially as a competitor, to your point, like, all right, if I'm not able to do these 3 drills in practice, how am I going to make up that time throughout the rest of the day? And, am I going to hit the wall for X amount longer than I usually would? Am I going to go in and watch film with my offensive coach? And then am I going to go in and watch film with Coach Petro just to hear what he, just to kind of ease that, that almost, to your point, like you get to a point where you want to compete so bad that, you could find other areas to do it, I guess is the best way that I could put it. And then, there's that combined with the fact that, I had some unbelievable coaches that I could trust. I guess a combination of those two is kind of how you kind of ease it in your head, and then seeing how it works on game day, right? Like if on game day I showed up one week after not practicing for 3 days and I didn't feel like I was prepared enough, like the next week I'd be like to my coaches, I'd be like, hey, I need one more day of practice, and I need a little bit more of this, I need a little bit more of that. So that's, that same process of tweaking and figuring out what works best. That's an ongoing process, but yeah, that's kind of the best way that I'd explain it.
You've mentioned before in this conversation about how you take more of a holistic approach in terms of balancing different things now than you did at one point in your life. How has your thought process on sleep particularly evolved over the years?
Yeah, that was, that's absolutely not something that I thought about in college. It was not like a thing really. We didn't spend much time on it. Obviously the classic of like, you got to get a good night's sleep, but like I never really measured it or thought too much about it. And it wasn't until I think it was my first year out of coaching when I was at Notre Dame, we had a specialist come in to talk about sleep. And that's when I started to learn a little bit about it. Then the next year after that, I didn't really think about it much. And then last year, when I was at Lehigh, our strength and conditioning coach spoke about it a lot. Like we had presentations about the positions of which to sleep, the hours, the consistency of the hours that you sleep, throughout a week and how that pertains to your recovery. I think that's when I started to think about it and research it a little bit more. Definitely made some big changes in the way I sleep. From I used to sleep on my stomach. That probably wasn't good for my back. Now I've, had to for probably a week straight. Once we had that presentation, like I said, last year, I was like barricading myself to sleep on my back so I couldn't roll over because it's just more healthy, a healthier thing. But that's a habit that I had to build after probably 20 years of sleeping on my stomach, that was one thing that was a big shift. And then the other thing is, over the summer during the PLL, we were given what's called a whoop. I don't know if you've ever seen those. So that was kind of the next where I was like really analytical now about it, and really understanding how to achieve enough sleep to dependent on what you did that day, dependent on, how much strain you had throughout the day and how much recovery you're going to be able to get, is very dependent on sleep. So, I don't think that I'm not super analytical about it. I don't like track how much I sleep every day the same way I track, the workouts that I do and the eating that I do. Like I do a lot more tracking with those two things. But sleep, I've definitely become very aware of it, which is, obviously made me, create some better habits with it, just in terms of being consistently, trying to fall asleep at the same time and waking up at the same time. Whether it's trying to fall asleep around 11:30, waking up at 7:30, trying to get into a pattern like that. And then from there, just kind of the position, but nothing too, like I said, it's not like I'm way more anal and disciplined with my workouts and my eating than I am with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are thinking to themselves about professional athlete and are curious about what type of daily routine you will go through in a season. So if you could break that down for us real quick, I'd love to hear about that.
So the season is pretty short. So the season is just the summer. So really a majority of my year is preparing for that season. And, like we've been talking about a lot of this, conversation is about preparation. And, I definitely take that very, very seriously. So, what I actually do is I put together something that I started doing about a year ago, is just kind of tracking everything I do throughout a day, and having a certain amount of I have kind of like a checklist of what to do every day. So, I read it in in an average notebook. I have like 4 notebooks of it now, but really like the way that it's kind of structured is with here. Hold on. The way that it's kind of structured is with, what week of the training cycle I'm in, and then, the day, the workout, what I did for training for lacrosse, what I did to compete that day, and what I did for my diet that day. So I kind of just developed like a tally system, and I'll get into each of them just to kind of elaborate a little bit. So, for example, my goal is usually to live, depending on. So I know this might be getting a little too crazy here, but it depends on how many weeks out I am of competition, right? So, right now I am like 25 weeks out of like competition.
And
right?
you have that number in your head at all times, like, oh, I'm X number of weeks out from competition.
Yeah, so I track back from like, okay, when am I competing? So for the next time that I'll be competing is training camp, which is, May 17th, whatever it is. Or we're actually not sure what it is, but it's around that time usually every year. So I basically tried to track back to when I started my new training regimen, which was, I guess it was like mid-September. Is kind of what I track back to. So, you take from then on and be like, and so I worked with my trainer at the same gym that I explained earlier that I've been working with for years, Acceleration. And, I went in and we basically literally took out a calendar and tracked back. Okay, how many weeks do we have? So what we ended up splitting it up into were 12-week segments. And in each of those 12-week segments were 4 3-week segments. So in each of those 3-week segments, I will do, a workout. So an upper body and a lower body, for, this 3-week segment. This 3-week segment, I'll do like upper body A, upper body B, lower body. And then, for this next 3-week segment, I'll do upper body, lower body, like that. Right. So that would be a 3-week chunk. Now, a 12. Sorry, hold on. So the 12-week chunk is split up into 4 3-week segments, like I said. And I'll have 3 weeks of certain workouts, 3 weeks of certain workouts, 3 weeks of certain workouts, and 3 weeks of certain workouts. So, I plan all the way from, okay, the day that we're going to be competing, how do I want to train for the next, like I said, 36 weeks, 24 weeks at a time. And then I'll be able to kind of segment what the lifts are. So, early on, certainly, the most basic way to think about it is like doing a lot more volume, high rep, with lower weight kind of early. And then as you start to get closer to playing, you want to work towards more explosive power movements. So, that's kind of the strength and conditioning side of it. And, like I said, so I'll try to get at least 5 lifts in a week. And that's split between like I said, some blocks it's upper, lower, upper, and other ones it's upper, lower, lower, something like that. Which are segmented into like chest and back, arms, legs, chest and back, arms, legs. So those will be like 6-day weeks. So then from there, I have my workouts for lifting, and then I also have like lacrosse. All right, what am I doing for lacrosse? Right now we're so far out that I'm not doing all too much. The reason being is bringing back to 10th grade is if I'm shooting for a straight 24 weeks, my back is not going to be able to handle it. Right. Mm-hmm. So right now it's much more in the development of my foundation of strength and training and stuff like that. So, right now I'm playing wall ball, I'm playing wall ball like 3 times a week and then like shooting once or twice. Right. So nothing too crazy. And then, so the way that my tasks kind of work is, obviously day, work out what I did that day, then lacrosse. And then the next thing is competing. This is something that I started to do during quarantine when, our season got canceled at Lehigh. I was, I needed to compete. I needed to do something every day. So whether that was playing Catan, whether that was playing cards, whether that was playing horse in the backyard with my brother, just finding a way to compete every day. I'm not a big video game guy, but unfortunately, because there wasn't much going on, I had to try to become one because I wanted to do something to beat someone. Competing, that's one of those things that's a non-negotiable every day. I want to do a +1 every single day. I got to find a time, whether it's, some days I'm doing a lot of competing, some days I'm not, some days I'm playing golf and I'll, make it, we're competing every single hole. So now that's almost like a +18, of on the competitive scale. And, just for the record, I'm not like carrying this book around in my back pocket, like filling it out, in between holes, or, I'm not out in the, out in the front yard playing horse against my brother and like tallying whether I'm winning or not. But I do definitely take a mental note of, okay, what did I do throughout the day? Or, I do also have a note in my phone that like, all right, I'll have like the day, and I'll start that in the morning. I'll just write the day and then I'll, write what I do, and then I'll come and transcribe it onto my notebook, later at night, or, even 2 days after, 3 days after, whatever it may be. So, competing, that's a non-negotiable. It's I need a +1 every day. And then the last one is diet. That's obviously, huge for an athlete, for anyone really. And the way I've been able to try to measure that is, all right, this 12-week segment, I have my weight, what I'm at now. I have my goal weight of what I want to be at the end of this 12-week segment. I use an app called Lose It, which is pretty easy to, basically plug in what you eat throughout a day. And each day it gives you a calorie amount that you want to hit. And either I get a +1 or a -1 on my diet every day. Some weeks I'm really good. I do a thing. I don't know if you've seen my Instagram, but I do a thing called Fat Sunday, where I try to eat really well for 6 days out of the week. And then on Sunday, I just absolutely eat whatever I want. And it's like turned into like this event with my brothers or, whoever I'm with. I'll just eat literally whatever I want. And that's just really to kind of give me something throughout the week to look forward to, that, okay, I'm being pretty disciplined in what I'm eating. And then, Sunday, just let me go. So that's my kind of tally system. So I'll get a +1 or a -1 on my diet. Now, so to kind of take it a step further, these pluses and minuses, I get a score at the end of each week, right? So on my lacrosse, let's say, for right now, my lacrosse scores are around 0 to 5 because I'm, playing wall ball a couple days a week, whatever it is. And each one is a +1. Right. So then competing, like I can now like actually have a tangible number to how often that I was competing, and then I could beat it next week. Right. And then it's almost competing in itself, and then, diet, the same thing, just kind of keeping track of, oh, wow, this week I absolutely let it go. Or, this week I was really good. How can I get back to that? So this is, this is a format that I actually introduced to our Lehigh players as well. Certainly throughout the quarantine, it's a hard time to stay motivated and stay organized and prepare. Right. So, we kind of do this, and we tally, what our score is for workouts, lacrosse. And then we, chirp each other in our group chat over, who's doing well and who's not. Right. So it's been really good for me to just have something to I have like my notebook that I bring with me. You know what I mean? Like I usually have a backpack when I'm going to the gym. Like my notebook's in there because later in my notebook is where all my workouts are. So I write the same way that I explained earlier. My sophomore year of high school through now is I have an idea of what the weights that I did the last time I did them, so I could beat them the next time. So it's just kind of my place that I'm able to kind of have a solid like hub. And then, from week to week, I'll like add something, I'll, I'll do like read 30 minutes a day is like a plus one. I'll do like take my multivitamin because I'm bad at being consistent with that. So I'll like make that a plus one. And then I can, kind of have the uniform of workouts, lacrosse, competing diet with, the other guys that I'm competing with on my Lehigh team. And then also have my own kind of things where, whatever it is that's important to me at that time, I can kind of keep track of. But it's just been a helpful thing to just have, that hub to just stay organized and continue to prepare and, all that stuff.
I have so many follow-up questions, man. This is like
Cool.
right up my wheelhouse right here. So with the competing, first thing, is it a +1, 0, or -1? How do you do the competing tally?
If I'm in a competitive arena, that's +1. I could lose, I could win, it doesn't matter. It's +1 for each
activity. So you could have 18 holes, let's say, or gotcha.
Yeah, and if you're doing it like that, usually what I'll try to do is golf will be a +1. Catan will be a +1, even if we play 3 or 4 games. Horse will be a +1, even if we play 4 or 5 games, or we play one-on-one basketball, or, I go shoot on a goalie. Like earlier this morning, I went and, did my upper body workout, and then I shot on a local goalie over at Power 10. And I made a little game in that while we were shooting. Okay, like, hey, best of 10 here, best of 10 here, best of 10 here. And then at least, basically the whole point is I want to train my competitive muscle. And this is just like everything else, in my opinion, of as you're preparing your body, you have to also prepare your ability to have some poise in competitive moments. And people constantly talk about, whether it's people use the term like ice in their veins. People use, Tom Brady at the end of a game, how poised he is. And I think that just like everything else, that's preparation. That's the amount of time that you've competed, because the more you do something, the more comfortable and confident you get in it. So why should that be different for a competitive moment? So if I want to be prepared for those competitive moments, and if I want to know in that competitive moment that if I have the ball in my stick, like, I'm good because I've done this before, and I've done it. Actually, I know the actual amount that I've done it in the last 15 weeks, right? So, like, it's just created for me a comfortability in those competitive moments, to be able to act in the best interest of our team in a poised way. And if you're just kind of jumping into a competitive moment, you've never kind of been there, and you mess up, it can be devastating. If you don't, you can do the right thing, right? So, people always draw the comparison about Michael Jordan, about how, he has so many late game heroics, when he also has a lot of late game and he misses those, misses shots, or, it doesn't go his way. And but for me, it's all about that comfortability in that moment. And the only way you get comfortable is through that preparation. So if I'm mindful of that, I can continue to train it.
Makes sense. And so where did you come up with the system? Where did this come from? Did you pull parts? Did you create this yourself? I mean, it seems pretty incredible to me.
Yeah, so I actually, I think it was on Twitter, somebody tweeted, I saw a picture of this chart, and it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, very similar to the way that I charted it, with, different things. So it was actually, I think it was a chore list. For kids. I don't know why it was popped up on my Twitter, but it was take out the garbage, whatever, take out the dog, whatever it was. And I saw little +1s in people's names in the family. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. What if I did that for training? So my first version of it, I actually have it in one of these notebooks, because it was the first time was about 8 months ago, maybe 9 months ago.
Very nice.
Yeah, the first one that I had was just check marks. So, it was workout, and then it was I wanted to have the superfood greens. I wanted to have a multivitamin. I wanted to have a protein shake, and I wanted to have a salad every day. Right. So I just had checks and X's.
Wow.
And then as it continued to develop, this is week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Week 10 was the first time I started with like trying to put a number system to it, because I was like, there's a pretty interesting. I read or listened to a podcast about Vanderbilt baseball, a study something that they do as coaches, which I absolutely fell in love with and try to incorporate in kind of everything that I do, coaching and doing this. Is they have a point system in practice, and they basically measure very, very minuscule plays, and so like I don't know exactly what it is for baseball or what it is at that caliber of baseball, but the core of it is basically like decision making, and tallying decision making and tallying very little plays. So you get to an end of a baseball game, it could be 3-2. They get at the end of a scrimmage, and it could be 35-25. Because they're statting, okay, did you field this play in the right way and throw it to first? Did you slide? Whatever their core values are for baseball, and I really don't remember what they were, but it's a pretty easy thing to translate to anything, right? So I translate it to what we do on offense. Like, okay, like, if you set a good pick and it's the right read, like, you get a point. You assist, a goal is coming off of an assist, you get a point. If you set you score on a cut, that's 3 points. Whatever it may be, we make little games out of it, because now you can have a game that really the score is 7-5, but you're really talking about the process of getting to that 7-5, right? So what I think what Vanderbilt calls it is process points, and they basically talk about all of the little things that you have to do to get to the end goal, right? And how can you reward or not reward for those things? So, that's something that I do just in terms of setting like our games at Lehigh and our practices and our drills specifically. But I was like, I kind of combined like that Vanderbilt process point thing with like this random tweet that I saw that was like about chores. And I was like, okay, like, this could be a good way to like organize what I need to get done, because during quarantine, it's really hard to stay motivated, stay organized, and stay on task, without having, the same structure that you'd usually have on a work day. Now you could kind of work on putting together a routine and a regiment by, just recording it in like a notebook type of thing.
I absolutely love it. It's process thinking versus outcome thinking. And one thing that I love about what you do is it reminds me of something that Jim Collins does. He's an author, and what he does every day is he ranks his day from +2 to -2. A +2 is an incredible day. Amazing things happen. -2 is an awful day. And he adds that to his tally, and it might make sense for you too as well. I mean,
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So John is just writing it down in his notebook for those listening at this moment. But so take us through something that we would be surprised with as lay people about playing professional lacrosse. What's something that would surprise the average person about what you do on a daily basis in the summer or outside the summer?
Yeah, it's
obviously professional lacrosse is very different than a lot of other professional sports. It's not a full-time gig for a lot of people. With the creation of the PLL, Paul Rabel and Mike Rabel did a really good job of trying to make lacrosse a thing that you can do full-time. And, as you know, the way that you do that is by trying to create an incentive, to play, right? So, obviously that comes to a wage, right? So like if you're able to make a living, the way that I always describe it to people is if you everyone kind of has their main job, and then they also play lacrosse. If you can get as many people as you possibly can just full time into lacrosse, what you're going to create is more coaches, because the other way to create income is through coaching. And the more good coaches you have, the more grassroots programs that you can create, and the more that it can kind of spread from there. So what Paul and Mike did with the creation of the PLL is obviously creating wages just for a summer that give you the opportunity to, if you want to, let's say the average wage for the PLL is $30,000 for a summer. So let's say you have that $30,000. Now you want to go coach at a high school. Let's say, and not many high school coaches make a bunch of money, but let's say it's like $25,000 for a high school season. Now you have your spring and your summer. Now you can also, let's say you run a club team, and your club team, you're bringing in $20,000 to $40,000 for your club team. The sport is very entrepreneurial. Is kind of what I'm trying to get at, because if we want to have lacrosse be a big time sport, we're going to need people in it full time, and you're going to have to eventually have seasoned people who, like in the MLB, they are baseball players the whole year. They don't have another job. They train for baseball, and the product on the field is better because they're able to have that year round, and they live in the place that they play. And then they become a little bit more of a a little kid is going to see him in the pizza shop, and you can have that kind of interpersonal connection. So I'm kind of all over the place here, but my point is, lacrosse is very entrepreneurial, and a lot of guys, the summer is an absolute grind. For you and I, or for the average, take my friends from high school, for example, right? They work in the city, or they work in Port Washington, or work in, kind of this area, and, they have weekends off, and, they work hard all week. They work long hours, but then they'll have the weekend off, and they'll be able to kind of, go to the beach, go golf, go do something. For, the people in professional lacrosse, you have your main job that you are working full time, and then you're flying out on Friday night to get to your game on Saturday, and then you're flying back on Sunday morning, and you don't really have a weekend, right? So for the 10 to 15 weeks of a season throughout the summer, which is, typically your time to go and do things that are outside and go to the beach and hang out with your friends. For professional lacrosse players, you have your season, right? And the other side of that is all of your training is not with your team. So that becomes a really, a tough thing to do in a lot of cases, because when you're in a team environment, you're able to kind of push each other. You're able to kind of do those things. But when two guys are living in New York City, I'm living in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, a guy's living in Dallas, 3 guys living in LA, you don't have team practices. So, the connectivity that you have is all inspired through your phone, and kind of like, trying to stay connected throughout the week and prepare your individual game, because that's all you can prepare. You can't you can't practice offensive sets. You can't practice defensive schemes. You have to just basically depend on your own personal preparation, and you have to trust that the other 20 guys on your team are doing the same. So that way, when you do show up, you can have the best chance of winning a game. And I guess the thing that would that a lot of people would be surprised of, I guess, with my personal, agenda in the summer, is, as a college coach, the summer is the most important time for recruiting. So for my personal weeks is like, I'm at a recruiting event for the months of June and July on a regular year. Obviously this past year wasn't very regular. But for June and July of a regular year, I'll basically be, in hotels, or, bouncing from one event to the other from Monday, let's say an event from Monday through Wednesday, or a recruiting event, just to be clear, a recruiting event from Monday to Wednesday. And then like Thursday and Friday, I'll be at another event, and then I'll fly out Friday night straight from that event. And then I'll play my game, or be at practice Friday night, play my game Saturday, and then I'm flying back in either on a red eye Saturday night or early Sunday morning to get to the next event on Sunday. And then, then it repeats all over again. So, and that grind is no different from every other college coach, because instead of going and flying out to the games, they're going to different recruiting tournaments or recruiting events and things like that. So I'm very lucky, because that's obviously That's basically 2 days or 3 days sometimes a week that I'm not recruiting. So I'm very lucky to have a boss, so Kevin Cassis, who's our head coach, who sees the value in me continuing to play because he played for 8 years after college while he was college coaching as well. He sees the value, in me playing, and he's okay with me missing basically 2 or 3 days of work every week, right? Because of the process of flying out and practicing, then playing, and then leaving. And that's not an easy thing. I know a lot of guys have retired from professional lacrosse because at a certain point in your career as a coach, you have to kind of be on the road all the time, right? And you have to be recruiting. So, I'm very lucky to be a part of a coaching staff that absolutely, first of all, works their tails off, right? With both my head coach and our associate head coach, Will Scudder. And they're able to kind of handle that 2-day period that I'm not there for, right? So I'm very lucky. There are a lot of guys who in college coaching just don't really do it anymore because they have to be recruiting. But just like, I guess the surprising thing is when you see the product on the field, which is usually a very high level product, and when you're watching the PLL, that all of that preparation comes, and all of that practice and training comes like at random times throughout the week. Like I do not have a set schedule and regiment during the summer because some days the event will start at 8 a.m. so I've got to work out at 10 p.m. and then some days the event will start at 9 a.m. so I can get my workout in at 6 a.m. and then kind of be able to be at the event the rest of the day. And some days I have access to a goal and some balls. Some days I'm like at the back of an event doing 300s between games because that's when I have some time to train a little bit. So it's I think most people do understand that everybody has kind of their main job, and then kind of they also play. But I think that a lot of people would be surprised at the variability that each player has for their training, and how that kind of leaks into their game day, and their game day preparation is very different for everyone, and is definitely something that's not easy. It's not like, it's really just not something that is for everyone. There are a lot of people who at a certain point get to the point, and in a completely understandable way, to a point where it's like, okay, like, I've got a wife and a kid, and I'm not gonna sacrifice my weekend and that extra 2 hours every day to work out. Like, it just becomes a lot. So I give a lot of credit to everybody who stays in the league, and specifically the guys who are in the league for a while. I think that it's unbelievable, and it shows how much people love lacrosse, and it shows what kind of community and what kind of people are involved in the community is hardworking people that, like I said earlier, are very entrepreneurial in a lot of ways, because I have a coaching job, but a lot of guys do club coaching and high school coaching and run clinics here and there, and they have to be very malleable in order to make their make ends meet, right? So I think that's probably something that people would be, maybe somebody who doesn't know professional lacrosse, how different of a week it is in terms of their preparation than say an NFL football team. So
does the lack of recognition bother you compared to other sports? Whereas you got people in NFL, NBA, you are basically at their level, but you don't get nearly the recognition because it's not a major sport. Does that bother you as a player, someone who's putting all this time in?
No, you know what? It doesn't, because I think that I understand it. I understand that we are in a time of lacrosse the same way Babe Ruth was in the time of baseball, right? Yep. Like those guys were, selling real estate and doing different things throughout a week. And, it was very much, that league where you're kind of like, you're certainly training and practicing, but it's not the same. So I just think that, it's just, for me, it's just an understanding of where the sport is at this time. And it's also the understanding of how important, getting our sport into people's hands is, because quite frankly, frankly, it's really exciting. It's a fun game to watch. It's a fun game to follow. There's some really interesting and cool stories behind each player's, background and how they've gotten there. And there's some really cool stories to be told and to be heard. And I just think that, I don't think that I necessarily care about the recognition. I think that it's just something that I'm like, hey, like watch it. It's pretty cool. It's more like, hey, like it's not for my better doing, but for like, you might just really enjoy it. So just, give it a shot, and the PLL has done an absolutely unbelievable job in terms of their, marketing, advertisement, social media push, what they did this past summer in terms of putting a bubble together, kind of being the first sport to put a bubble together, really. And the success that I at least have heard from people that I know, that people had watching it on NBC. I think that Paul and Mike Rabel, as I alluded to earlier, are positioning lacrosse in a way that, like I said, 5 years ago, we did not have, in terms of, being able to do lacrosse full time. And I think that's kind of where everything starts. I could be wrong, completely wrong on that. But the more people that you have in lacrosse full time, whether it's coaching, college, high school, club, little kids, whatever, and the more people that you have being that kind of entrepreneurial, jumping around and running clinics and running this, the more people that, maybe there's a kid who, who's in Arkansas, who hears about a thing at the local high school, and he goes and he likes lacrosse, and now you got a couple, now you got a fan in him, and his parents are probably watching it with him, right? So I do think that it kind of starts there, and then all the things that they're doing around social media and getting NBC Sports involved and all of that has certainly brought us to a different level than it was definitely at 5 years ago even. So I do think it's, like I said, I don't think that it's something that I'm like upset about. I know the work that I put in because I want to do it. I care about the game. I love the game of lacrosse. I don't necessarily need everything. Obviously everything would be cherry on top, and that'd be great, but at the same time, it's just such an amazing sport, and I've just loved it for so long that for me the work is something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy having a process of doing it, and if I'm able to be a part of a great group of guys and be a part of a team and continue to play as long as I can, I will do that. Right. So it's, it's just as rewarding, the same way coaching is as rewarding of a profession. Right. I mean, the people that we grew up with, or, thinking about, my transition from playing in college and graduating college, and I had an economics degree from Hopkins, and basically all my classmates were getting into some sort of finance, real estate, type thing, and then my friends from home kind of doing the same thing, and for me, I found my kind of passion in coaching and continuing to play, and coaching isn't rewarding financially. Coaching isn't rewarding, in terms of getting the limelight and things. And that's why I think certain people coach and certain people don't. And I think that coaching, the way it's rewarding is the relationships that you create with your players, is the memories that you can help harvest with your players, the lessons that you can kind of teach your players, the camaraderie of being a part of a program and a team and building something great. And I think that all of those things are very consistent with why I still, why I don't work on Wall Street, why I don't have, some of these jobs that I, quite frankly, turned down right out of college, and now I'm very, is a couple years of, as Gary Vee would say, eating shit, and, lived in South Bend, Indiana, and, alone, moved out there, with basically no money, and bought a $500 car that had 300,000 miles on it, and, pushed it half the days to work. And, as a volunteer, I wasn't able to have keys to our building, so I'd have to basically get there at 6:30 to walk in with the janitors, and you do those things because you love it, right? You do it because I didn't know that I loved it at the time, to be honest with you. It was my first year of coaching, but I wanted to just do everything that I could with it and give it everything that I had, to be like, okay, do I like it or do I not like it? Because if I half-ass it, I won't know if I don't like it, or I won't know if I do like it. So, and my time at Notre Dame was certainly, as a volunteer assistant, you can't make money through the school. The only way you can make it is through running clinics or running camps or bartending or driving Uber. And I did all that, for a year where all of that, everything around it was hard. No doubt. I lived in a, bunk bed room in the back of a tennis coach's house. And, I ate peanut butter for 3 meals a day, I did those kinds of things. And, what I found was the rewarding piece was the time that I spent with our players at Notre Dame, the time that we spent on the field at practice, the process of training. And I personally coached face-off guys, the face-off unit, and I had never done that before. So I was like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to do it. And, so from there, I moved from after Notre Dame, one of our assistant coaches, who was one of our full-time assistants, got the head coaching job at Colgate University, which is when he hired me as the offensive coordinator at Colgate. And that was 1 year out of school. And I was certainly very lucky to be positioned at a place like Notre Dame with such good coaches. And, I was able to follow one to be now a full-time assistant with, now I'm like making money. And now I'm like, I don't have to use this $500 car, and it's, and then I've continuously worked from there, right? So I've, throughout my career, in kind of, obviously in kind of a tangent of, what the kind of question was, but I've certainly kind of fallen in love with the coaching piece, while the other stuff was hard. Socially, it wasn't easy in South Bend, Indiana, as a 23-year-old kid, where you can't go out and hang out with college kids because you're a coach, right? And then at Colgate University in Hamilton, New York, it's not the most bumping, place for a young assistant. While the school's great, kids have a great time, they do all that, but as a coach, it's not the same. And then now I'm in a place at Lehigh where I feel not only comfortable professionally, because of how much I love our coaching staff and I love our team, but also I'm 2 hours from my parents' house where I am right now, and I'm able to kind of make those trips very easily. I'm able to come here for the weekend, and now I'm kind of just hanging out here with being able to work from here and work out from home. So I've definitely been very lucky to where I've who I've been close with, from Hopkins to Notre Dame to Colgate to now Lehigh, but also that recognition piece has not been the driver. It's the driver has been that rewarding piece of, and I mean, the easy way to put it is passion piece of loving what I do and not having to work. I literally don't work. I study film. I love studying film. When I go and work out, I love working out. When I'm, out at practice with the guys, I love the guys, so it's like, it's one of those professions that, there's obviously gives and takes to everything, but, I think that's consistent with the professional sport is people do it because they love it, and not necessarily because they need the recognition. Now, hopefully in 30 years we get both, but for right now, I think everybody's pretty at least content with with what's going on in terms of the trajectory of where we're headed.
What's the vision? Because everything that I've listened to just now sounds like a future head coach to me, but what's your vision for where you want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, I the goal is definitely to be a head coach. I think that would be a really cool experience. And in terms of using all the things that I've learned over the past really 25 years, my whole life, right? And try to create a culture of all the things that, we've kind of touched on a little bit, throughout this conversation here. But yeah, a head coaching job would obviously be the goal. And then, really to just be in a place that cares about lacrosse, that wants to win a national championship as badly as I do. When that starts to, when something like that, an opportunity like that kind of comes together, yeah, that's certainly the goal. But for right now, the vision is learning. The vision is developing a relationship with my players and our recruits that we put together a couple of really, really good recruiting classes in the last year and a half that I've been there. And I'm really excited to, my vision is to win a national championship with those guys. And for right now, I guess something that I think I read in a book somewhere, but there's a very different, there's a huge difference between vision and mission, right? And the way that I kind of think about it is, yeah, the vision is certainly there, of being, kind of the head coach of a place that, really cares about lacrosse and creating a culture, a winning culture and developing players. But the mission now is certainly very clear to me, which is, developing the players that are at Lehigh right now. And, learning from them the same way I'm teaching them, and, developing with them more than just, I want to develop. I want to grow. I want to get better. There's you can read, a wide list of books that talk about this, but one that I certainly give to a lot of our players, and one that I fall back on a lot is Mindset by Carol Dweck, that talks about trying to grow in anything that you do. And I think that for right now is the mission. Obviously, like I said, the vision is out there, but I don't know how soon that I'm looking to do that. It's more of for right now, learning, developing, and just creating relationships, and then winning a championship at Lehigh, right? Like that's the goal right now. I think that with developing a culture that all wants to do that also, and continuing to push that culture in that direction, is something that I would love to continue to do. But difference between mission and vision, right? And I think that the mission right now are those things, where the vision is out there in the distance at some point, but there's no timeline onto that stuff. It's more about right now, just hopefully getting a season in here, and being able to get back out on the field with our guys, and being at our first practice, right? That's the hope. That's where we're at currently. But to your point,
this has been a lot of fun, John, and I'm really grateful for your time and wisdom. Where can people find you if they want more John Crawley in their life?
So on Instagram, my handle is jcrawley44, and then it's the same on Twitter. And then and yeah, man, like I haven't spoken in a while. Really pumped that you've gotten this podcast off the ground. This is unbelievable. Just looking at the names that you're having conversations with. I can't wait to start with, if you have 100 podcasts, I can't wait to start at number 1 and watch your progress as you continue to go through. But no, to even have my name in the same conversation with some of the guys that you're interviewing is very grateful, and that's way out of my league for sure. So I really appreciate you thinking of me in this, and would love to come back and do it again. I had an awesome time. And then if you're ever in Port around or whatever it is, love to grab a beer and hang out, and then go from there.
For sure, man. It's been a lot of fun.